Hey everybody, this is Paul here, and I'm going to mess with Blender. And just on a little side topic, if anybody knows where I could get work doing this kind of thing in the lower 48 of the USA, yes, lower 48 states, if I can get a job doing graphics work, I would like that, because I'm kind of getting tired of what I'm doing. But that's another side topic. I'll probably actually jump in front of the camera for a change sometime and make a short video just saying what I'm looking for in a job in my background. Maybe give some people a clue why I'm getting tired of what I'm doing now, but enough of that. Let's get to Blender. That's the whole point. Alright, so we got our camera here and our light. We're not too worried about our light, but our camera. So let's say I'm gonna make this cube a moving object. So I will do is just keyframe its location, and so many frames later, we'll keyframe its location again. So we'll do that. Notice we're with the I key. I have the little screencast thingy on here, so if you see it here, yeah, never mind. But yeah, so this object starts here and moves like that, and if we switch to the camera view, see the object move there and go like that. So, say I want my camera to follow this object, I'd have to keyframe the camera, wouldn't I? So, back to camera view and go like this. This is just for an example here. I'll lock my camera to view. And I don't want it to go around the center, do I? Alright. So, how do I do this? I guess I gotta use the rotate and not that one. Z, yeah, Z. And then rotate X, or local X, I guess. Alright, so then I'd keyframe the camera rotation. This is just like how most people would think. They're going to go, okay, I'll do that. And then it'll jump to the next keyframe. Oh, I gotta do it for that selected thing. I have to have the object select. Well, I jump to the next keyframe for that. And then pick the camera again and... Oh. Whoa. What am I doing? It moves really fast, but anyhow. There. That's what I want to do. So you'd have your camera. Whoa, it's not even doing what I wanted it to do. Alright. Let's go outside of this. Weird. Why is the camera keyframing like that? Anyhow, it's just kind of difficult to do it. And with a moving object, it's even more difficult. So, let's see. I'm trying to explain here. So I want my camera to, you know what, it might be my settings here. Let's see, user preferences. Might have something that's good for modeling, but not good for camera setup. So, editing. Interface. Global pivot. Okay, it's not on the camera selection. Camera parent lock. Let's rotate around selection and give me a beer. I don't know. Let's see. So I go to this keyframe here. I pick the camera, and it is keyframed, right? So rotation. And then I go to the next keyframe. Oh, that's probably what's messing it up. I probably... And rotate. do a rotation here. So there we go. But it's already tricky enough to try and follow that animation. If you see the camera doesn't quite follow it smoothly, the camera has its own angle interpolation going on at the same time the objects. So just trying to track that. And then if you wanted to dolly and pan your camera or fly your camera about the scene, so say I wanted my camera to follow it while I am here, but while it's doing that, on the second keyframe, I don't want my camera where it is now, but I want to go out of the scene, and say my camera jumps over here somehow. So now I gotta do is, I guess, enter my camera to look at the object. So I'll go back to that, and rotate it around, and that stays here. Well, can move it like that too, but it's fairly tricky. So now I do a location and rotation, and you know what? I didn't save the location from the first set. Oops. So now I gotta refix the keyframe for that. Alright. And the default values aren't anything good anyway, so it just puts it at the origin. Doesn't put it where the camera starts it. Anyhow. Let's get this back where I want it. Something like this. Okay. And location rotation for that. So now you're trying to follow the block. Well, I got lucky that time, it worked, but normally it is very hard to do stuff like that. That's just luck there. But anyhow, better way to have your camera go back to the default scene. We'll just do a new default scene. I want to reload. Now, a better way to do this is to use tracking, so let's do that. And that is a constraint, so we'll apply it to our camera. You can use the damp track or track 2. Damp track is pretty easy. You just click on the camera, add an object constraint, and target it. And where is it? Oh, this is probably a path. Oh, I had the wrong one. That's clamp 2. I want damped track. That's the one. Damp track. Okay. So you just set the damp track to your camera and pretty much click on the target item, which is a cube, and you set the cameras up, or forward position, I guess is -Z. So now we go in the camera, it's always watching the cube, no matter what. So this is kind of nice. But it's still not all the way where we're at, because we can do a lot of things in a scene. So even better than having it follow a specific object is to use an empty for the camera to follow. Because then you're not worried about being stuck on one particular object. So we'll do that. Fly out. And I'll also show you the regular tracking too. Sometimes it might be easier to use the other one. See, this one is damp track, which isn't bad. It's pretty good. But sometimes it might be better to use track 2, which works in a similar way. So we set cube, Z, but up has to be Y, I believe. Yeah, in case of the camera. Okay, so we're good again. Works a similar way. Alright, enough of that. But even better than that is to use. Where is it? Oh yes, I have these create things. Empties? Yes, empty. And I got an empty now, so I'm good. Plain X uses fine. And we're going to rename this to camera target. And what we'll do is we'll assign camera's tracking to camera target empty. And this way you can animate this independently of any other object in the scene, and that's where your camera will aim. Most people already know this trick, so this is pretty cool. But what some people don't realize is that you can add locations or a location constraint to the actual empty. So if you want this empty to fly to the cube no matter where you have it off in space, and you're not going to spend all your time trying to figure out where a cube is and get it lined up. And it's even trickier if this cube, like I did previously, is animated. So say I keyframe location here, and then 60 frame later keyframe a location there. Now you'll have to add extra keyframes just to get that to go to that if you're trying to follow it. So that gets really tricky. But the cool thing is you can use a relationship, and I believe it is copy location. Yeah, copy location, and we'll set the location to this cube. So now it has an influence value, and you can keyframe this influence value. So at 0, this target thing will be wherever it is. So see, like I'm looking off into space here, I can insert a keyframe there, and then when this thing comes up, say, or actually I have it backwards, I forgot to move it back. Dang it. Anyhow, this will have keyframe near of 0, and when this thing moves to wherever it is, like let's say halfway through its movement, we want the camera to start looking at this object. So we'll just change the influence of that targeting to 1, and then we'll keyframe it. Right, so we'll keyframe right there, and 60 is still 1. We don't really need the keyframe there, but it doesn't matter. Actually, it goes back to 0, so yeah, it does matter. We gotta clear the keyframe or delete that keyframe. Alright, so now if I were to go into camera, we'll see that the camera is looking off to wherever, and then all of a sudden it follows that object, like, hey, I'm looking over there. And that's kind of neat. And you can also use an offset. An offset is respective to the local or world space. I think it's probably easier to use the world space option. But I thought of an even better idea is that each object can also have its own empty assigned to it as a child. So say like you want to be able to lead your target, look ahead and see where it's going. So instead of trying to keyframe and offset all the time for this empty, the best thing to do is to position this empty, which is a child of this object. So make that a child, Control P. So now anytime this object moves, that empty should move with it. Oh, maybe I did it backwards, huh? Darn it. It's probably backwards. Alright. Yeah, it's backwards. Alright, so see, I want this object to have its parent be the cube. And then I want that to be in front of the cube, because what I want is to see where it's going, right? And I have my camera frame it to see where it's going. So now instead of having it location to cube, I'm going to change the target location to this. And I guess we could call it cube. Well, it's not exactly target, is it? Or cube. What would a camera do? Is this cube framing or I don't know, cube, pointer, I don't know. There's probably a name for that kind of thing where you lead a visual, but I don't know offhand. So I go to the camera target, set it from the target cube to cube pointer. So now when it starts to look at the cube, it will lead the cube by looking at the pointer in front of the cube, so you get an idea of where to look, and that's the thing I was trying to tell you about. So let's take a look at it in action. And all of a sudden you're like leading your target. And this is good, like sometimes an object is big and you might want to look at a certain spot on an object. And instead of being always facing at the origin, you look at the pointer. So if I were to want to look at, where is it? I have the cube pointer grabbed. This thing here, right here. See, I want to look at the bottom edge of this or something. Now if I go to the camera and play the animation, it looks at the bottom edge instead of the origin. So that's a really handy thing. And like I had luck before, I had the camera at one location, and then I fly the camera around so many frames later to another location. See over here. So now if I go to the camera, it's looking, and then all of a sudden it gives chase, or looks at it. So you can get some really neat, weird, smooth animations, and your camera can follow the target. And then when you want to look at another object, say I want some other location, so I gotta add an empty. Let's add another empty. And for some reason this is just another location you want to look at. So where's my camera target? You can also do it off the outliner here, camera target. What we can do is go to the previous keyframe right there. Okay, that's good. And let's add another copy location constraint to that next empty. So that empty. But it will get confused if you have both of these at the same time. So I'm going to go to the very beginning, set this influence to 0, and keyframe it. So it will totally ignore this one here. So it'll do its thing like it's been doing, and we'll jump to the next keyframe. This one's 1. We'll still leave that at 0 because we don't want them interfering with each other. And say about 80 frames out, we want it to stop looking at whatever this target is and look up there at the other one. So instead of pointing at the cube, it's going to point off at that other location. So we drag this influence back to 0. And of course it's going to go to the last location of that pointer. It's okay for now, because what we are going to do is drag this one up to here and insert keyframe. So you could actually have different things you want your camera to look at in a scene, and these can be moving objects that these things are assigned to. So you can follow this guy, and he passes the MacGuffin object to the other guy, so you're following this guy as he's carrying a MacGuffin. He hands it off to the other guy, and all of a sudden you can watch him, and that's the way to do it. So we'll just view this from the camera's perspective. And of course I'm a little lazy and messy in this, but what's going on here? My camera is probably looking at both influences are turned to 0. So what's going on here? Camera target. Then keyframe at the wrong place. That one should be 1, and then that one should be 0. So this one is 0. That one is 0. Alright. And this one is 1. This one should be 0. Well, you know what it is? It's interpolating between those points. So what I want to do is make sure this one is still 0. Add another keyframe. Sometimes you gotta. That's another thing you gotta be careful about. You still gotta keyframe stuff. Of course, you can go to Animation Outliner and see that too. But now, if I'm following around, I've snapped on that object and look up there. Yeah, it's some SE animation. Not the world's best example, but hopefully my explanation makes more sense. So I'm looking off, all those things fly, and it tracks that for a little bit, and then it decides to look at that. Of course, I probably have it keyframed too close, so I could probably, is there a way to move that? Well, I probably gotta go in animation. And dope sheet. Let's have a look at it. So if I go to camera view, camera's looking off and it decides to follow that object for a bit and it looks off. Well, it's goofy, but you get the idea. Is that there are more complex ways to have your camera track in Blender, and maybe I'll do this again when I have more time and I can set it up properly for a good demonstration. But you get a loose idea of what can be done and how to follow multiple objects without going crazy, manually keyframing your camera, and can follow action from one place to another this way. And then you don't have to move your target manually either. You can just constrain it to locations and then just set their influences. But yeah, keep an eye on your keyframes, and like I do here, is always do test runs at your animation before you even start to render, and you can get an idea what's going on. Alright, that's it. Bad, aren't I? See you later.